I finally stopped overeating this year. If somebody had told me last year that I would be making this video, I probably would have laughed at them. But here I am in December this year, finally being able to eat the portion sizes of a normal person. I've been struggling with portion sizes, with appetite control ever since I moved out of my parents' home, which was about 6 years ago. Probably because it was the first time in my life that I was responsible for every single thing that I was putting into my mouth. And I started obsessing over this every single bite that I was ingesting. Thoughts about food kept occupying my mind pretty much 24/7, and I would not have a moment throughout my day in which I would not be subconsciously thinking about my next meal. The food noise was permanently there. As one gets older, the responsibilities don't really become any less, and putting this much mental energy into making sure that I don't indeed all of the food that I desire to eat is something that exhausts you more and more over time. This February, I finally came to the realization, I know it's a bit late, but better late than never, that I have to make a change if I want to live my life to the fullest and enjoy all of these experiences the same way as my friends and family do, and finally achieve food freedom, or at least start my journey towards food freedom. So today I'll share with you what worked for me along the way and what still works for me today. By the way, big disclaimer, I am not a therapist. I am not a professional in this sense. But I did watch a video from another therapist prior to making this one out of curiosity. I wanted to see if something overlapped with my experience, and 3 out of the 5 things that she talked about were things that I started implementing intuitively, and they finally made an impact. If you're interested, I will be putting the video in the description box below so that you can check out the remaining 2 things that I'm not going to be mentioning because I didn't do them, but they could also help you in your journey. The biggest change that I made starting February was to remove any type of restraints around the portion sizes that I was allowed to have. I was then technically permitted to eat to satiety, no matter how much food that would be or how many meals per day that would mean. This was also my biggest problem with food. I would never feel completely satiated and satisfied with the amount that I had. My portion sizes were about the same as my boyfriend's. We would be eating the same plates. And mind you, he weighs somewhere between 30 and 35 kilos more than me and is on a bulk. So he's striving to gain weight, and I'm not aiming for that. I'm just aiming to feel full and well and satisfied with my dinner. Although I could not experience any type of satiety signal, because of the amount of food, the volume, I would feel also physically very bloated and unpleasant. And since I stopped overeating, this is one of the issues that has now been largely regulated. So it was not just my mental health suffering from trying to control my amounts all of the time, it was also my physical body not performing in the most optimal way possible. Now that I was eating as much as I wanted technically, that for me, in my context, would be the same healthy-ish foods, just in larger amounts, plus an extra snack or 2. My most frequent snack at the time that I saw on TikTok, and it became the biggest favorite of this time period, were yogurt bowls. I highly encourage you, if you're looking for let's say high protein dessert that is actually very satisfying for a sweet tooth, to go and look up combinations that you can make. I didn't make any videos at the time, and kept things pretty simple with just granola and yogurt, peanut butter, and some frozen fruits, but you could technically put anything that you desire on there. And this is something that I was looking forward to every single day, to be honest. Logically, because I was eating more food than usual, I knew that I was going to gain weight in the process. And if you're somebody who has a fear of gaining weight, and I also was somebody that was feeling very anxious about this process, this could be a very challenging experience mentally. Physically, it led to me being very puffy and very bloated in the beginning because of the extra amounts also of carbohydrates that I was having. But the idea is to eat whatever I want and how much of it as I want to. And in my context, that would mean that I would eat more carbohydrates. It's just what I desire to have on my plate. What you can do to make the best use of this process, and also what I did, was to do strength training. And in my case, it was really only strength training in that process. I had 3 workouts per week that were full body, and the idea here is to gain strength, make progress, gain muscle as much as possible during this time period that I was consuming extra amounts of foods. Not surprisingly, I feel like this is the quickest that I have ever made progress. I had a lot of energy that was also being put to pretty good use, and this way, if you also believe that you have a slower metabolism, can actually increase that, since if you gain muscle, this is the most highly metabolically active tissue, you are going to increase your metabolism. And this is the strategy that a lot of people who have damaged metabolism, suffer metabolic adaptation, they don't want to hear that, because they got to that point a lot of the times by restrictive dieting and losing weight. But in order to repair the metabolism, you have to gain weight. It's not going to happen unless the reason for your slowed metabolism is a specific thyroid issue. Then of course there would be another solution to this problem. Last thing before I move into the second topic, I am not somebody that eats a lot of processed foods or a lot of highly processed foods. I have not been consuming them, implementing them into my routine for years now, especially after completing my bachelor's in nutrition. With all of the knowledge that I had about all of the nutrients that I need to be ingesting, I could not imagine myself consuming these other types of foods, knowing that they're not helping me towards my journey to be my healthiest self. Your perception of the sugary taste can actually adapt to the amount of sugar that you're ingesting. And if you ingest lower amounts of sugar, your sense of how sweet something is would also change. You would be able to taste less sweet things, and a very highly sweetened thing would overwhelm your receptors. It also goes the other way around. If you're used to consuming a lot of sweet foods, then your sweet receptors would be a bit more numb, and in this way, you're not going to be as sensitive to sugar anymore. One more thing to keep in mind if you decide to adopt this strategy, this is that if you want to remove all restrictions around foods for yourself, and that would also mean consuming a lot of highly processed foods that are high in sugar and fat, and I mean they would make up most of your diet, this could then lead to this entire process backfiring. Mostly because of the way these foods are supposedly acting on your dopamine regulation system. I say supposedly because this topic is a bit more controversial in science, and of course they don't act in the same way on the dopamine receptors, exactly the same way as addictive substances do, but they might have a similar mechanism. And this is something to keep in mind, since if you feel the urge to consume then more and more of these foods, then that would not help in improving your natural satiety cues, and regulating your appetite. It could actually make the problem worse. So if you decide to do something similar, it would be wiser to pay attention to the foods that you're ingesting and less attention or no attention at all, in my case, to the amount of foods that you're ingesting. So now that I had stopped putting cognitive effort into how much food am I going to have throughout the day, I noticed a couple, 3 months in maybe, that I would serve myself the usual plate, the usual portion size, and about 2/3 in or 3/4 in, I would feel the satiety signal kicking in, and the rest, if I was to finish the plate, would make me feel bloated and stuffed. I did not have the desire to clean my plate. In the other video where the therapist discussed all of these things, she named this as planning to eat more and then ending up eating less. This could benefit you in the way that it removes, again, the restrictive mindset around the amounts that you're allowed to have. So now you're not craving it as much anymore. You're not creating this type of rebellion in your head. If you experience something similar along the journey, where now you're feeling satiated at an earlier point on, and you actually listen to this signal, stop eating and put the leftovers in the fridge for later, you could also, over time, erase this mindset around cleaning your plate at all costs. To be 100% honest with you, I also belonged to this group to a certain extent. I would usually finish my plate, even if that would mean that I would feel a little bit more full than what I'm comfortable with. But over time, if you practice, you can free yourself from this belief. And another benefit of this is that you end up putting in less effort since you cooked more food, but now you have leftovers, or you have leftovers from your restaurant, so you don't have to be thinking about your next meal that much. You already have something on hand. So it's something that does not only benefits your body and your mind's health, it also can lead to a bit more free time in your routine. Over time, as your portion sizes naturally decrease, I say naturally because it is very important to actually listen to your body and not start getting into the restrictive mindset again just because you believe it is about time to decrease your portion sizes. It has to come naturally from your body's signals and not from a place of fear that you're going to gain too much weight or from a place of insecurity. For me personally, the puffiness and the bloating started to decline, and now, although I still weighed more than my starting weight logically, I was definitely not feeling uncomfortable as I was in the beginning of this journey. And then maybe you might actually get what all of the intuitive eating coaches talk about. Of course, if you're somebody that has had some type of disordered eating issue, to start intuitive eating all of a sudden is not possible. But I believe that over time it is achievable, but it would take you a lot of hard work. The third thing that I still do to this day, especially in days where I have pretty large gaps between, let's say, my lunch and my dinner, this is not telling yourself no to the bigger portion size than usual, but postponing the extra amount of food for later. Let's say that now you're at a point where your portion sizes are regulated, you require normal amounts of food to feel satiated, you don't feel bloated after that, you're enjoying yourself and the way your body feels, but you had a hard day, you didn't have a lot of time to have the usual, let's say, mid-afternoon snack that you have, and you're feeling very hungry before dinner, not only physically, but also mentally hungry. You just want to eat more. And what I do when this happens, because it's not that uncommon, especially when life gets busy, this is to serve yourself the usual portion size that you would normally give yourself now, and do not deny yourself the option for more food later. The idea is you're going to have now this plate, and after you finish it, this could be like maybe 15 minutes in, you're going to maybe have a second plate, or you're going to have something else that you planned for. And what usually ends up happening is that either I don't have anything else, or I end up having an extra thing, but it is not of the same magnitude as what I was planning for originally before I started having dinner. Again, here what plays a very big role is the lack of restriction around the foods and not creating a rebellion mindset where now that you have denied yourself, you're not allowing yourself to have the extra amount of food, you desire it more than if you were not restricting yourself from it. And since I talked about lunch and dinner, I have to stress the importance of having a routine. You cannot expect from your body to perform the same way as other people's bodies do that have healthy routines if you do not teach it to desire foods at certain times of day. There is no perfect routine for this. Everybody's eating habits are different, also depending on your schedule. This could mean 3 meals per day. This could mean 2 bigger meals per day. This could mean 3 meals and a snack. This could mean 3 meals and 2 snacks. But you need to have some type of schedule around your food. If you are not being strategic and you're not planning out your meals throughout the day, I do not know how do you expect to not overindulge in things that you were not planning for. I'm not talking about getting obsessed over eating at these specific hours each day. I'm talking about not waking up and then having your first meal at 6 p.m. This needs to become a non-negotiable. It is a form of self-love and self-respect that you have to adopt. It is the bare minimum that you can do for yourself. And here I'm going to give you a pretty personal example. We lost our childhood dog this year in September. Everybody reacts differently to such heavy emotions. And when talking about eating habits, even research has said that when you're experiencing a lot of psychological stress, some people tend to experience a decreased appetite. Some people overindulge in foods and use it as a coping mechanism. And rarely people don't even experience any change in their eating habits at all, but that's also possible. In my case, what happened was very extraordinary for me and for my relationship with food, and it is that I lost any interest in food and in eating. It would even feel weirdly selfish to think about these types of, let's say, earthly things when this specific situation has just happened. And here it's very important that you keep showing up for yourself in this bare minimum form of self-care, self-love, and self-respect. Nourishing your physical body could be the first and maybe the easiest step towards crawling out of this hole that you feel like you're in right now. Giving up on yourself in this moment sometimes does not change anything about the situation. Specifically in this one, it is not going to have any impact on anything. If you don't know where to start with piecing yourself back together, such acts can feel very grounding and bring you back to, let's say, normal life slowly over time. You need to keep showing up for yourself, just in the same way that you keep showing up to school or to your job. And it is not selfish to take care of yourself. What would be more selfish is to give up on everything, let yourself go, damage your own health, and not be able later on to be there for all of the other loved ones in your life. This will be 100 times more selfish than maintaining the healthy routine prior to what happens. Actually, if you go and look up online, what can you do for depressive episodes apart from talking to a therapist or taking medication, the first thing that is written almost everywhere is to make sure that you maintain a healthy routine in terms of eating habits and in terms of physical activity. You don't have to go all in. You can take it step by step. Nobody expects of you to act as if nothing has ever happened, but letting yourself rot both physically and mentally all day, day after day, is not going to benefit you or the loved ones around you. This got a bit too dark for my channel and for this video, but I feel like it is very important to mention, especially if you're somebody whose eating habits are very tightly connected to their emotions. I hope that you find something here that resonates with you. I usually don't do these types of videos, but it is something that I was reflecting on a lot about recently as the year is coming to an end, and I felt like I had to share with you all of the things that I feel like I've learned along the way. I probably still have a very long way to go, but it appears, at least to me, as if I've made some progress. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the contents of the video. Let me know down in the comments if you have a topic of your interest for me to discuss next time. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my socials, my website, and also my other videos that are more science-packed than this one. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.